Chubb is a $114 billion company, one of the world's largest insurers, and is on a very short list of stocks I'm interested in today. The Chubb of today is actually the result of the Chubb of 2016 merging with a company called Ace. Ace was an insurance company doing a solid job, but struggling to find name recognition for the great work they were doing. Back then, they had a terrible problem of needing to make more money on the cash that had piled up after benefiting from a few years of low claims. But interest rates were too low for good returns on fixed income. Ace was not a company that would take on risk without getting paid appropriately for it, so their opportunities were fairly limited. But they looked anyways. Chubb was also in need of a new opportunity for the same reasons. Plus, their CEO was already a year past normal retirement age. While Ace was evaluating options, they saw a company that was similar to themselves, but complementary in that they had a strong brand and business lines that could stabilize market cycles. When you don't have an opportunity to spend money that will get you organic growth, one option is to cut costs instead, and one way to cut costs is to scale up. Chubb didn't come cheap though. Ace paid $28.3 billion, which was twice Chubb's book value and a 30% premium to their market value at the time. Now all Ace had to do was combine two massive insurance companies, which often doesn't go well, but Ace had achieved much of their growth to date through similar acquisitions, so they felt like they were ready for it. Ace was now Chubb. Their name recognition problems were gone, but they had to keep growing that legacy, and to actually achieve the benefits of scale and synergy they had just paid for. But how are they going to do that? Insurance is a commoditized industry, where a company makes a deal to pay another party if something that party is worried about actually ends up happening. This makes having an edge over your competition very difficult. The main way companies do this is through underwriting, ensuring that the cost they pay is less than the fees they charged. But for the customer, there isn't much difference between the promises of any two insurers, so the lowest price usually gets the business. Needing to have lower prices to draw in customers causes a cost-cutting race to the bottom, especially for things like auto insurance where people don't really want it but have to have it by law. But there's a second strategy to getting people to choose you over the next insurer: name recognition. Companies like Geico or Progressive choose to not cut costs on advertising because being the first recognizable name on a list of options helps people choose them instead of the next one. So insurance companies have naturally converged on these two strategies to get people to pay them rather than their competition: cut costs and advertise. But Chubb takes this one step further and forces the question, are these just strategies to solve the bigger problem of how to make money as an insurance company? To know that, we have to dig deeper. The way to judge an insurance company ultimately rests on two things: how well do they underwrite, and how do they behave when it's time to pay? The easiest way to tell if a company has good underwriting is to look at their combined ratio over time. The combined ratio is basically what they paid in losses and expenses divided by how much they got paid. Cutting costs improves this number by lowering the expenses portion, but Chubb's combined ratio is way better than most. Chubb still does a good job of keeping expenses down, but they take a totally different approach to having a good combined ratio. They just charge more. It's an idea so simple that any other insurance companies must have thought of it and just weren't able to do it. Both old Chubb and Ace always took underwriting so seriously that when it was time to pay, they had no excuses. So the only thing left to do was to provide great service while they took their losses. Of course, avoiding all opportunities where you might lose is not the cheapest way to operate a business because you can end up losing a lot of customers. But Chubb went on like this for a while before they entered the high net worth business, where this approach really shines. Chubb didn't decide to behave this way by looking at what other insurers were doing. They just kept doing what they thought was right, and it turned out their preferred behavior was more expensive, so they had to make it work. Charging more sounds simple, but it turns out it's not something you can just do. A company that's charging more has to continuously pile up reasons that the customer will allow them to ask for more money. This isn't easy, especially if someone else already has a big pile of reasons like Chubb does now, which leads us to the Chubb brand. Chubb has been behaving in a way that improved its brand in the minds of its customers for a long time now, but to see how, we have to look at some intangibles. Each time a person sees the Chubb name, they have some idea about it in their head. It could be nothing at all, or it could be very positive. Chubb will make more money and be a better investment over time if it is positive. They just have to get it there and keep it there. Insurance companies might pull in business by having the lowest prices or the best advertising, but their reputation is based on how they behave when it comes time to pay. The dynamics involved when an affluent customer makes a claim for something they had a deep personal interest in protecting and insured voluntarily are really different than when a normal person has to insure their house or car. And many of these dynamics are social. If your fancy art collection is lost in a fire and a friend asks you if you got paid from the insurance, you want to be able to say, of course, I had Chubb. and that's better than any commercial. They have to curate an identity as the one that pays and get paid for it. Chubb has that reputation today, and there isn't really a close second. Now they just have to maintain this image by continuing to do what they've always done and find more customers that value it. Another thing that differentiates Chubb is that they have an Evan Greenberg. Evan is a furiously smart person and a ruthless businessman. He's nearly 70 years old and has spent almost all of that time in insurance. But does Evan being CEO actually give Chubb an advantage? He was basically born into the insurance business since his father is Hank Greenberg, the guy that drove AIG to be one of the biggest and best insurance companies in the world. Of course, AIG's story ended in scandal, and one of the many things that went wrong was that Hank was such a domineering force that he created a massive hole in the company when he left. There's an argument to be made that Evan being the leader of Chubb actually suppresses the stock price over the long term, as people worry that what happened to AIG will happen to Chubb. I think this is a ridiculous argument. If you look closely, you'll notice that these two are not the same person, and despite any patterns we might notice, history does not actually repeat itself. Anyone that looks at Chubb's numbers or listens to Evan talk about the company will realize he's a highly competent and engaged leader. To suggest that you'd rather have a worse leader than a better one at any point in time is foolish. The fact that people might be thinking this way sounds like it would result in more of a discount to the stock price than a detriment to the company. But he is getting old. However, I think if Evan was going to retire, he would have done it by now. I think he identifies in a deep and personal way with Chubb and its success, which doesn't sound like a downside to me. The real question is, can we estimate how much Evan being CEO is worth compared to how much that factor might be undervalued by the market? And beyond that, what we should do in the long term when someone else eventually has to take over and live up to the standard Evan has set. And all of this leads us to the Buffett question. Warren Buffett bought a substantial stake in Chubb for Berkshire Hathaway in 2023. The SEC even allowed him to do it in secret to avoid any potential market manipulation. But Buffett has known about Chubb for decades, so we have to ask ourselves, why now? Evan joined Ace in 2001, which is enough time to see any impact he might have had. But Chubb didn't merge with Ace until 2016. Mergers are often not as good for the acquiring companies as they think they will be, and certainly not ones of this magnitude or when the companies are this similar in size. Berkshire needs companies to be of a certain size before they can consider them. Otherwise, even a good investment result would not make much impact on their overall success. Given that Chubb, after the merger, would be squarely in Berkshire's range, and that insurance is the heart of Berkshire's business, I'm sure Warren had his eye on it the whole time. But he's also patient. Evan estimated that the merger would take roughly 2 years to start showing results. These estimates are almost always too optimistic, so Warren might have waited 4 years to start checking for results. So while we're allowing ourselves to operate in the realm of guesses, we might as well entertain a more extreme one, the potential for an acquisition of Chubb by Berkshire. Warren is always looking to buy whole companies of high quality with great managers, and I'm sure Evan would love to not have to report to analysts each quarter. But Warren buying a stock almost always causes the price to inflate because of the people following him in, and increasing the price of something you plan on buying doesn't exactly make sense. But this signal could be interpreted differently by Evan himself. If Warren approached Evan directly with an intent to acquire, they would have to disclose that to shareholders. Plus, Berkshire likes it better when people come to them. Either way, it creates a win-win situation for Berkshire. They've already made over 30% on the investment itself, and if it puts the idea in Evan's head for a potential buyer, then all the better. But I'm not sure he would even go for such a deal. He seems to be driven by getting Chubb to succeed on its own merits. However, when Berkshire buys a company, it tends to leave him alone. So if Evan was going to sell Chubb, it would almost certainly be to someone that let him continue running it his way. But we have to be careful operating under so much guesswork and ask ourselves how much we should allow these ideas to factor into our estimation of the company's value.